Everyone hear me okay? Good evening. My name is Ron Hallman, member of the FCC Bellevue Church, and I want to welcome everyone here tonight to a presentation by two Colombian peace activists, Xiomara Cintron Garcia from Bogota and Pablo Moreno from Cali. Gotten to know Pablo the last 24 hours or so as he's been staying with us, and it's been a real joy. Looking forward to the presentation, as I'm sure you are. I don't know if are you putting up the, Columbia Partnership, if you note on up there, the Columbia Partnership was formed in the spring of 2021. Pacific Northwest Conference of the United Church of Christ and the Disciples of Christ Northern Lights region voted to enter into a partnership with Justapaz and Cedicol in Colombia. They'll be telling you more specifically about what the two organizations do. And at the United Church of Christ General Synod 23 in 2021, we joined with the Disciples of Christ in authorizing the partnership and sending Alex Maldonado and Xiomara Cintron to Colombia. The Colombian partner organizations are formed now, and we have Justapaz, which is the Christian Mennonite Association for Justice, Peace, and Nonviolent Action, and the Evangelical Confederation of Colombia Peace and Justice Commission. See up there. Xiomara serves with the Christian Center for Justice, Peace, and Nonviolent Action, Justapaz, as I just said. And her work with Justapaz is in the area of women and peace, where she helps women from churches, communities, and socio-ecclesial organizations to develop and build peacemaking processes. She also supports women's political advocacy by promoting and witnessing dialogues for reconciliation between diverse women victims of Colombia's armed conflict. I think of that in terms of restorative justice. Pablo has been a professor at the Universidad Bautista de Cali, Colombia, for the past 30 years. He's a history professor. In 2009, he was elected director of the Peace Commission of the Evangelical Council of Colombia, which brings together 70% of Protestant churches and denominations in Colombia. From the direction of the commission, he has promoted several programs, churches being sanctuaries of peace, building support networks for women victims of the conflict, School of Bible Training for Peace, and the program of investigation and advocacy for the victims of the conflict in Colombia. As some of you know, Colombia has suffered through a difficult and sometimes violent modern history, beginning in the 1960s and 70s with a drug trade led by Pablo Escobar and the civil war involving FARC. Peace accords were finally achieved in 2016, but it has been a bumpy and often difficult road to try and achieve a lasting peace that is fully supported by both sides. Both Xiomara and Pablo will now discuss those challenges and fill in the blanks regarding the critical work they both perform to create this lasting peace in a society that is seeking a permanent solution to the decades of violence and inequality. I'll just add a personal note. As growing up and as an adult, I was never much interested really in the country of Colombia or other countries in South America for that matter. And then when my son traveled down to South America in 2016 to Medellin, he did a language school and then completed the language school, worked in Peru for a year, and then he came back to Colombia in 2018, and he's been there ever since. And he met his wife-to-be, a woman from Bogota, and they married in 2020, and we now have two grandsons. And so they live down there, and so since 2018, my wife Uda and I have been down there 5 times. And we found the country to be absolutely beautiful in 2 respects, really. One is just the natural beauty, the Andes Mountains, the incredible terrain, the diversity. And the other thing is just the people. The people are wonderful. They're kind, they're warm, they're very family-oriented. And so I feel now I have a personal investment in the country when you have someone in your family that lives there. And we just hope for the best in terms of the work that's being done by Xiomara and Pablo, and we hope that it ends in a successful achievement. So would you please welcome both Xiomara and Pablo. Pablo will be addressing us first. And one other thing before he comes up is if anyone has any questions at the end, come up to the microphones. If you don't want to be on camera, just stand in the back. So otherwise you'll be recorded. So without any further ado, Pablo.
Thank you, Ron, for the presentation. Thank you for coming and connected for this meeting. For me, it's the big opportunity to share about the Colombian conflict, and not only conflict, but about our work for the peace in Colombia. I represent the Peace Commission of SEDECOL. The Peace Commission of SEDECOL, SEDECOL is the Evangelical Council of Colombia. It represents the 70% of the evangelicals and Protestant churches in Colombia. The Peace Commission was born in 1996 because of the need to train churches to promote peace building. Colombia has suffered a conflict that has been going on for more than 70 years. Evangelical churches have been present in many parts of the country where the conflict affected the civilian population, without distinction of race, sex, and religion. In the 1990s, there was an expectation of change with the new constitution, 1991, but at the same time, the intensity of the conflict remained and grew. The history of the conflict permits us better comprehension about the situation. Several reasons can be identified for the reason for the conflict, but the most widely accepted is the struggle to the possession and use of the land in the countryside. Several actors influence this struggle for land: guerrillas, paramilitares, drug traffickers, and large landowners. Many churches are present in the countryside, and that is why the peace commissions accompany the churches begun there. Through pastoral visits, legal accompaniment to victims, training, and organization to manage small survival and productive projects. The conflict today is the map. The dark colorized areas show land controlled by armed non-government groups. These are rural areas. The people here are primarily indigenous or Afro-Colombian. The Colombian government is not existed in this area. No army and no police in these areas. Is the west in Colombia and the east Colombia. In the center The big cities is the different situation, but it is the rural space, countryside zones. The people are at the mercy of the armed groups. They experience killings, recruitment into the armed groups, kidnappings, demands to relocate, and sexual and physical violence. People live off the land, but the land is being despoiled by illegal, meaning that polluted rivers and overspraying of coca crops by the Air Force that make land infarmable. Who is its groups? Marxist socialist groups seeking and it to tremendous wealth, inequity, and land ownership by just a few. Paramilitary groups who contract with legal and illegal mining companies from Canada, China, and United States, and elsewhere to provide them with protection. Drug gangs is the other actor, and Colombian army. Unfortunately, the Colombian army uses paramilitary groups as a front to cover up our participation and illegal resources extraction. In this moment, the different groups, ELM, dissidents of the FARC negotiation with the government in 2016, the peace. The other dissidents, that is the not firmed this accord, but after that left the negotiation. Paramilitary groups, mainly in this zone, this is the blue, this is control the frontier with the Venezuela and the commercially for the drugs and coke. In the timeline of the conflict, permit us a rapid the vision, general vision of the conflict from 1949 and 1959 is the violence, is the fight between liberals and conservative party. In 1960 to 1980, rise of the guerrillas. And in 1998, 2004, the birth and rise of paramilitarism. And 2005 and 2016, humanitarian crisis and peace process with the FARC. Today is the situation when I present in the slide before. Who are members of the Peace Commission? The Peace Commission is made up the men and women representing SEDECOL members organization. The organization that make up the Peace Commission are Unibaptista, Justa Paz, Prison Fellowship, and Corporation for Community Social Development, Peace and Hope, and World Vision. What do we do? The Peace Commission developed its work plan in 4 lines of action. A School of Peace is a process of formation for peace by studying history and memory of the conflict. Not only do we tell a story, but we encourage participants to tell their story of the conflict, how they have experienced and suffered it. A biblical perspective of peace and reconciliation. We teach principles to be peace builders and promote reconciliation. Bible and gender, we promote a critical reading of the Bible, proposing the recognition of women that Jesus made and encourage them to share stories that highlight how they are preventing violence against women. Pedagogy for peace. In this model, pedagogical principles are present to encourage peace building. Workshops are held and which participants propose concrete ideas on how to teach peacemaking in familiar situations. Defense of human rights. Pastoral visits are carried out to accompany churches and communities' analysis of the human rights situation and protection action for victims. Humans Network for Peace promote networking, violence prevention, advocacy, and peace with a focus on gender equity. Advocacy for several years, the documentation of cases of victims of the churches was carried out and advocacy actions were carried out. In partnership with Justa Paz, a document with specific cases called the Prophetic Call was published. How do we do it? With the commitment and contribution that each member organization provides for the Peace Commission. The people who work in the commission do so ad honorem, but each organization allows time for this work. Thanks to support the global ministry of United Church of Christ and Christian Church Disciples of Christ. And the support Kerk Nazi and Protestant Church of the Holland, we have managed to continue this work to accompany the victims of the conflict in most of departments in Colombia. To finish, I want to share some stories about our work. The story of one of the women pastors. She told us how they arrived in Nelson Mandela neighborhood of Cartagena. Displaced from the north of the department of Chocó, several families had to travel by land and then by sea to Cartagena, facing many dangers, sexual harassment, abuse, and violence. Days after arriving in Cartagena, they settled in this neighborhood that received a large displaced population from the other regions. From the church that received them, they began to help with the little they had to the families who were arriving because the displacement and had built a support network to sustain themselves temporarily while they managed to organize there or go to another city. Other story, during 2021 strike in Colombia that began as a protest the tax reform proposed by President Iván Duque, and then lasted almost 2 months in several cities, in particular in Cali. The Peace Commission supported families, young people, and churches affected by this confrontation. Support was provided with the preparation of lunches, first aid items, and protection for families and young people under threat. These actions were carried out in Cali by Unibautista, in Bogota with Justa Paz, and in Medellin with the Prison Fellowship and the Peace and Hope. For the past 4 years, the Peace Commission has been supporting the Ciudad Paz City collective, which is made up of a group of people who have been reincorporated from the FARC, and which is one of the results of the peace agreement between the Colombian government and this guerrilla organization that decide to lay down his guns. This group is working in two ventures, a clothing project and a honey production project. Demobilization means laying down one's weapons and rejoining civil society. This process is very hard for the people that they were for 20 or 30 years in the mountains with the arms. The mobilization is coming to the cities. This is a different life. For them is beginning and again. Churches in Buenaventura. Buenaventura is the main port of Colombia in the Pacific Ocean. In Colombia, there is a problem of continuous violence that in this time confront two armed groups in Buenaventura. These groups are residual paramilitaries. The names is not a political connotation, but is the armed groups, the gangs, the chotas and espartanos. Heirs of the paramilitarism and dedicated to extortion, micro-trafficking, and do not have a political but an economic purpose. The civilian population, including churches, live in the crossfire between these two groups. Several young people are trained with forced conscription and pastor trained for talking about peace and reconciliation. A pastoral couple had to leave the place for 3 months because the pastor's wife was alone at home when the crossfire between the two groups began. And this experience lasted 3 continuous hours. She was hiding under the bed without receiving any support. As a result of this, she was left with a nervous trauma, and we helped them leave the city and take her to specialty treatment and pastoral accompaniment for 3 months in Cali. What results stand out? We have managed to accompany more than 100 churches that had been affected by the conflict, displacement, threats, and violation of international law. We have trained an average of more than 150 people per year in peace building. We have strengthened relationships with churches that have committed to peace and reconciliation. We have consolidated a women's network that extends to 5 regions of Colombia. What are our challenges? The Peace Commission needs to increase the participation of ecclesial sector in concrete peace-building actions. The Peace Commission needs to give continuity to the specific projects that have been proposed, advocacy and entrepreneurship. The Peace Commission must strengthen its organizational structure to improve communication, process, management, and advocacy action. Thank you for listening to this presentation, and thank you for coming here. Bless you. The question is now or?
Does anyone have any questions for Pablo? I have one. Pablo, I'm curious, the new president, Gustavo Petro, how is he being seen by the Colombian people as a president who's helping move the country towards peace and reconciliation, or something else? I know it was a big change from the previous government.
Yeah. Ok. Bien, entonces, ¿me vas a traducir? ¿Me vas a traducir, cierto? Sí, vamos a ver, sí. Mejor para expresarme en español ahora. Acá está, creo. Ok. Bueno, el presidente Petro efectivamente ha optado por un plan que se llama la paz total, porque él considera que si se hace la paz con este grupo, estos no van a dejar las armas y van a continuar el conflicto.
Okay. Más espacio para si lo podemos separar en dos partes. Okay, this president, Oh, the microphone.
Sí,
Okay.
para que te escuchen los que están conectados. Ya.
¿Me lo puedes
Otra vez,
repetir
sí.
otra vez?
Que efectivamente el presidente Petro está proponiendo un plan de paz total.
Okay, the current president is proposing a total peace plan. Can't hear me still? Okay. Well, the current president is proposing a plan called Total Peace for the advancement of total peace.
Ya, porque él considera que si se hace la paz con un grupo solamente, eso no resuelve nada. Los
Yeah.
demás grupos van a continuar.
Yeah, he believes it's either with all the groups or none, because if he only makes an agreement with one, of course everybody else will be out and nothing will happen. So.
Esta es una propuesta nueva en comparación con los procesos de paz anterior.
This is a brand new proposal. It's a whole other view, correct, than from past presidents.
Por otro lado, él está proponiendo también unas reformas sociales profundas.
Oh, and he's also considering very deep social reforms, very different reforms from the past.
Pero como la votación que se obtuvo es una votación que no tuvo una gran diferencia entre él y el segundo candidato, entonces políticamente el país está dividido.
Yeah, he didn't get the vote. He barely got enough votes. So the vote in the population is very divided. So as we all know, it's difficult to advance plans that way.
Entonces, eso solo pasa en Colombia. La oposición no deja gobernar al presidente.
The opposition doesn't let the president govern. The opposition doesn't let the president govern. Sorry.
Yo sé que eso no pasa aquí o en otros países, pero allá sí.
He says he knows that doesn't happen here or in other countries.
Entonces, eso ha afectado porque algunas reformas todavía no han podido pasar la aprobación en el Congreso.
This affects his reforms. They haven't been able to be passed in Congress.
Esa sería la respuesta a esa pregunta.
I think that's the answer to that question. Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question with regard to the effects of mining in your country. How extensive is the mining, and have there been problems with the persecution of the native peoples, the killing and that type of thing, like it has been in Guatemala and in Honduras?
Lo de Guatemala no lo entendí.
No, es que en Guatemala ha habido mucho efecto en el pueblo indígena.
Ah, ya.
¿Y cómo está afectando a la gente en Colombia? Si está afectando a la gente indígena.
Bueno, en la minería, ¿no?
Sí.
Sí, la minería está afectando a las poblaciones originarias y a sectores campesinos.
It is affecting the indigenous people and people in the countryside, right?
Algunas poblaciones son presionadas a salir de esos lugares.
They're having to flee.
Les afecta su economía porque muchas familias viven de la pesca artesanal.
It's affecting, a lot of the people there live off the land, of course, and it's affecting fishing also.
Y los ríos pues son desviados y a veces para poder excavar y llevar toda la maquinaria allí.
All the mining equipment is also deviating the natural course of rivers.
Esto sucede con la minería ilegal y también con la minería permitida legalmente.
So this is being done by both legal and illegal mining. So
Hay una ley que permite que las comunidades sean consultadas antes de autorizar estas empresas, pero esa ley no se cumple en todos los casos.
there are laws, of course, that require them to consult with the local communities, but of course they're not being upheld. So. Yes?
My apologies. What do you teach at Peace School?
Oh, es profesor de aquí en la escuela de Paz.
Yo enseño en la Escuela de Paz el módulo de Historia del Conflicto en Colombia.
He teaches the story of the conflict in Colombia, yeah.
Y algo que mencioné rápidamente allí en la presentación que hemos implementado metodológicamente es no solo que yo cuente cómo es el conflicto, sino que los participantes también vengan y cuenten su historia, su experiencia en ese conflicto.
So part of it, when he's teaching it, he doesn't just teach it, he also invites people who were in those conflicts to tell their own personal stories.
Eso es poner la memoria al lado de la historia.
That's called putting memories alongside history.
Y por eso mencioné brevemente la historia, el testimonio de una pastora negra que llegó a Cartagena huyendo de la violencia, del desplazamiento y pudo contar otra cara de esa historia.
That's why he talked about the black pastor, a woman, and her story of displacement. Any more questions? We're good.
My question is the powers that create problems for the country under whatever name, do they have a respect for the churches so that the churches are a refuge for the local people?
Que si los grupos que están todos los problemas que traen todos los problemas, como todos los diferentes grupos, si tienen respeto para la iglesia.
No siempre.
Not always.
En algunos lugares las iglesias han sido afectadas porque los miembros o pastores, pastoras ejercen su derecho a opinar y a rechazar actos violentos contra la comunidad.
There has been retaliation because some of the pastors, female and male pastors, have practiced their right of free speech and to give their opinions, and they haven't liked it.
Por ejemplo, la historia que mencioné sobre Buenaventura, nosotros trabajamos allí con jóvenes en cursos de construcción de paz.
And that's what he spoke about, an instance in Buenaventura where they were teaching courses on peacemaking. And ¿y qué pasó en Buenaventura?
Que cuando hubo el enfrentamiento
There was a
de los dos
conflict, there was a
grupos,
confrontation of the groups there.
que la esposa del pastor tuvo que estar 3 horas escondida.
Yeah, and the pastor's wife had to hide for 3
Sí.
hours.
Por ejemplo, allí los pastores han sido amenazados
They've been threatened, pastors have been threatened
por permitir que nosotros estemos hablando de paz,
for permitting them to speak about peace. So,
porque ellos hacen reclutamiento de jóvenes para sus grupos
because they're recruiting the young people for their own groups.
y nosotros traemos a esos jóvenes para que hagan otras actividades, escuchen otras ideas, entonces eso choca con estos grupos.
Yeah, there's a conflict between, it sounds to me like they're all fighting for the youth, you know, the church, to keep them in the church and give them different options and different ways of thinking and teaching them about peace and conflict resolution. And then you have these other groups that are trying to, recruit them for their own work.
Sí, y parte del trabajo que nosotros hacemos se ve afectado porque en varias ocasiones tenemos que aplazar los talleres, las actividades, porque hay amenazas contra la población allí.
Aplazar.
Postergar.
Okay, they've had to postpone in the past different activities because of that.
Yo quería mencionar, no sé si hay más preguntas.
Any other questions?
Bueno, quería mencionar que actualmente el gobierno está adelantando negociaciones con el Ejército de Liberación Nacional.
Currently, the government is in talks with the Liberation Army.
Y que nosotros tenemos una representación de las iglesias evangélicas en las conversaciones que el gobierno y el Ejército de Liberación Nacional tienen con la sociedad civil.
Okay. And they're, in these talks, his organization does have representatives that are active in these talks. So.
Sí, y entonces esta es una buena oportunidad para participación de la sociedad civil.
This is a very good opportunity for the civil association. ¿Así se llama la asociación?
Society.
For society in general.
Civil society.
Civil society.
Otros acuerdos, otras conversaciones de paz que el gobierno colombiano ha hecho con grupos armados no tiene en cuenta la sociedad civil.
Other talks haven't had civil society in general in mind.
Por ejemplo, las conversaciones del gobierno nacional con las FARC fue durante 3 años en La Habana.
In La Habana.
Habana, Cuba.
Okay. So, for example, for 3 years, they were in talks with FARC, but that was being done in Havana, Cuba.
Y después fue llevado para que el país lo aprobara o no en un plebiscito,
Un plebiscito.
una votación.
Okay. So then they brought it back for vote. Pero, y eso.
Como
A referendum?
referéndum.
Okay. A referendum. Thank you.
Sí. Entonces, en esta ocasión, este gobierno ha aceptado que el Ejército de Liberación Nacional también propuso que a medida que se hacen las conversaciones, se hagan reuniones con la sociedad civil para que la sociedad civil escuche los avances que hay en el proceso.
Okay. But in these instances, unlike before, where they weren't sharing what the advances were, now they are doing so. And se están requiriendo que
Sí.
it's being required to do so, to share what the advances are in the talks.
Entonces allí tenemos participación, este sector de las iglesias y también de iglesias históricas en Colombia.
And the churches are involved. So that's fair.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you can see me. To this side? Or I'll just take. Hello? Okay. I think this one is better. Good evening. My name is Xiomara Cintron Garcia. I'm from Puerto Rico, but me and my husband, we have been living 3 years, almost 3 years in Bogota, in Colombia. And, well, now I'm here. I usually get really excited when I get a microphone. I said it in Olympia, and I'm going to say it right here. I feel like a superstar. Like, wow. Because back in Puerto Rico, I was a math teacher. And not all people get excited by seeing a math teacher up front. So, but you guys get excited to see me. That's good. Thank you. Well, before I start with sort of my presentation, I want to give you like a background context of what global ministries is, because usually people like don't grasp the concept that great. But global ministries is the communal missional witness of the United Church of Christ and the disciples of Christ here in the States. Global ministries works, and I say works, with approximately 250 faith-based international partners in close to 90 countries, 23 national denominations, and 46 ecumenical partners. But I say work because it's not that global ministry sends mission co-workers to different part of the countries, like to save people there, or to just to plant churches. They work with local organizations or churches that are already working or have a long history of working for peace or for justice in their territory, in their country. So I want to leave that out clear. In Latin America and the Caribbean office currently works with dozens of partner churches and ecumenical organizations in 20 countries, where we are responding together to God's call to serve all of creation. Global Ministries accompanies partners as they grow innovative ministries through prayer, the sending and receiving of missionaries and financial support. And Global Ministry is accompanied by our partners in the rich exchange of ideas and lasting friendships that come with the many people-to-people pilgrimage that take place every year in this region. In Latin America and the church, In Latin America, the church reminds us that ministry is not limited to pastors and missionaries, but includes all walks of life: nurses, churches, sociologists, lawyers, economists, human rights advocates, farmers, health educators, social workers, construction workers, physicians, and all who engage in preaching through their talents, energy, and time to share the good news of God's love that calls for justice and peace for all humanity. And probably you're thinking, Xiomara, why did you lose all of this time saying all of those professions here? It's because it's not just Alex and me in Colombia by Global Ministries. It's all of you working in our hands, in our heart, and in your prayers, accompanying us, accompany them in this whole peace process. Mission is always a community in mission for the defense and protection of life, says the German and Brazilian theologian Paulo Suez. I think we can pass on to the next. There we go. In order to make this work plausible, Global Ministries is led by 5 core values that lead our work and mission. Those are community, mutuality, justice, peace, and presence. But in our case, in our work in Colombia, we are led mostly by 2 of those. We're led by all of them, but we focus on 2 of them. The justice, by which we mean living out God's radical love by confronting power that denies the fullness of life and the integrity of creation. Next one. There we go. There's the justice part. And in the next slide, you'll see peace, which implies embodying, reconciling relationships with God, humanity, and creation. There we go, the peace one. Okay, justa paz. But now let's go to the more local in Colombia. Justa Paz. What is Justa Paz? Justa Paz is an organization of the Christian Mennonite Church of Colombia, which acts in pursuit of Jesus Christ from an Anabaptist identity with people, churches, and social organizations that seek to exercise active citizenship and fully live their rights and contribute from their being and doing in the construction of a just, nonviolent, and peaceful society with all creations. But you will be thinking, when did all of this started working? Justa Paz was founded in the 1990. So if we do the math, we'll figure out it's more than 30 years that Justa Paz has been doing its work in the Colombian territory. So Justa Paz has developed an extensive experience at the local, regional, national, and international level, together with Christian evangelical churches, socio-ecclesial organizations, and institutions in training, organization, and action process for the construction of lifestyles that lead to just and sustainable peace, based on their local identity and capacities. In this way, during the last or more 30 years, Justa Paz has managed to position the voice of the churches in spaces of advocacy and fundamental decision-making to improve the living condition of communities that have lived during the armed and social conflict in Colombia for more than 60 years. But how does Justa Paz work? Okay, this is the really important part, because it's usually when I say areas, I'm not talking about Colombia. I'm talking about the different divisions in Justa Paz. Justa Paz has 5 main areas of work or projects. I work in one of them. My husband is in another project. But when we do these trips to different parts of the United States, we don't talk about just our work, like Xiomara's work. We talk about the whole organization work, because this is a whole process, a whole peace process. This is not just me having the star on my head. This is everybody working together. So when Justa Paz started, the main projects are the area of peace building and reconciliation, or construcción de paz y reconciliación. That's the white letter. I don't know if you guys can see it from there, but it's in Spanish and English. What do they do? I'm kind of summarizing the works of the different areas, because if I start giving examples of every area, we'll be here for another 60 years. So I'll just go into detail in my area of work. But in the peace building and reconciliation area, they accompany local dialogue processes between opposing actors and promote reconciliation exercises in community, institutional, and faith-based spaces. This area also promotes the collective care of life as a foundation for the construction of a reconciled society. And they are also committed to strengthening good practices for local conflict transformation to advocate in the local, departmental, regional, and national development and peace efforts. Well, I said I was not going to give an example, but I'm going to give an example, if you don't mind. That area, before we got to Justa Paz in 2021, they did what is called Fútbol Paz. They were in the Cali, where Pablo is from, which is, I lost it. I lost it. Here it is, the yellow one. Here in Cali. They were working in Cali, and they had different gangs. Well, obviously you know what gangs do. They start, civil society is in the center, everything is a disaster. So what they did was they put these two gangs together, like, let's talk, let's have a dialogue. We'll buy tennis shoes and uniforms, and we're going to create two football groups, or soccer, what is known here as soccer, two soccer groups. And if we do some agreements and stop the war, stop killing each other, we can have this soccer tournaments every certain time. And that brought peace to that territory, because they actually agreed on stopping the fight. Obviously, they fight in the game, because everybody gets really excited about games, but it wasn't killing each other. That's like a summary. The other area, the other slide. Okay, the other area, it has a very long name, but it's the project of nonviolence, conscious objection, and prevention of the recruitment of boys, girls, young people, and adolescents. What do they do in this area? They seek for churches, faith communities, social ecclesial organizations, and youth groups to develop and implement strategies to promote active nonviolence, the prevention of the involvement of boys, girls, adolescents, and young people to legal and illegal armed groups in their territories. Likewise, one of its emphasis is to promote and ensure the right to conscious objection to mandatory military service in Colombia as an indispensable tool for peace building. Why do I mention legal and illegal armed groups? Because not just the armed groups are bad. Sometimes the military from Colombia, it's also bad with these kids. They usually go to poor areas, to very rural areas, and they just ask them about their military situation. Military situation, I mean if they are subscribed to the military or not. And since they don't have money to pay, they're like, oh, you have to come with me. And they take them illegally, okay? And so what this area is trying to do is trying to show this kid that they can consciously object to being in the military and that they have legal tools And in Justa Paz, they have lawyers who give them the legal accompaniment through these processes. It's not just giving them the tools, it's also accompany them during the process of doing that. And giving tips and tricks to them, like if they come and they tell you this, like you run, or don't tell them, you contact us. They have an application that the kids can press in their phones if they have any phones. So different tools to don't go to war. The other area, this area is the one where Alex works, my husband, is the area of historical memory, human rights, and political advocacy. They accompany the evangelical Christian community victims of the armed conflict in Colombia, strengthening the process of construction of historical memory, the defense of human rights, and access to truth, justice, reparation, and actions of non-repetition of individuals, communities, and social organization, ecclesial victims of the armed conflict and socio-political violence in Colombia. They also do a thing that is called, it's like a booklet. I have one there. I don't know if I can move. Yeah? Okay. I'll get out of the live stream. I'm sorry. Okay. They also do this kinds of books annually that is called Llamado Profético, or a prophetic call. It has different articles depending on the topic of that year. This was the women's last year topic. So it has, I have an article here, life stories of 2 different women that we work with. It has articles, and it also documents the different human rights violation in different situations, in churches, in organizations, individuals. So they register all of that, because if you don't know what is happening in the territory, if it doesn't have a name or an amount, it will not get processed in the system, and people will not know about. So they document all of those cases in this annual prophetic call. They are also, they're in Spanish. I'm sorry, we're trying to get them all translated, but they're in Spanish. They're in Justa Paz webpage. They're free. You can access them from any computer. And another one of the areas of Justa Paz is communication for peace, where Justa Paz, that's Justa Paz radio station in the Bogota's office. And Justa Paz has proposed to position a communication system to influence the regions in the construction of a communication alliance for peace. This seeks to position a communication system to influence peace building from the regions using multiple journalistic genres, social networks, communication technologies, and alliances with community stations. And, well, I don't have to give an example of that, but we know we're driving into the technology era, and everything gets live streamed. Thank you to the live streaming crew up there, Jake and Anthony, I think it was. There we go. The crew. Everything, it's really important with all the communication system to get out all of the material so that people will know their stories and how they can help and what is actually happening in actual or real time. And the last area, the last but not least, is the women, peace, and environmental justice area. That's the area I accompany. The name before, I think it was this last 1.5 years that it was changed, because before it was just women and peace. Now it's women, peace, and environmental justice. Not just because women have to take care of the environment, but it should start somewhere. Okay, so we're starting to get all of this new environmental justice approach to everything we do from the area. Next Well, there, to give like a summarized context, because Pablo already gave us a very clear context in Colombia, but to give a context of the armed conflict in Colombia, for more than 60 years, Colombia has been mired in a complex internal armed conflict, starring different actors and staged in different territories of the nation. The alarming number of its victims amount to more than 9 million people, with nearly 12 peace processes in its history between insurgent and paramilitary groups. Even today, the impact of this conflict persists in everyday life. Around 1990, Colombia signed an agreement with the M19 guerrilla movement, and in 2016, it managed to sign a peace agreement with the FARC guerrilla. Today, we are seeking an agreement with the last of the oldest guerrilla in Colombia territory, the ELN. And I don't think you can see from back there, but the different colors in the map, they represent a different armed group. The yellow one is the major central state, which is around this side mostly in the south part. The second Marquetalia, which is the blue one, they are pretty spread out, not that big as the yellow one. The red one, the National Liberation Army, which is pretty much around. And the Clan del Golfo, the Gulf Clan. Yeah, translation sounds weird, but that's a translation. Which is the green one. What happened with this? What happened with women and the armed groups? Probably you're thinking, but women shouldn't face any problems with the armed groups because they don't go to war or whatever. But many women are left to be the leaders or the head of the family after the men have been taken. Taken, we don't know where. They may have been taken, forcibly recruited. They may be dead. They may be even in another country. Like they crossed the border or something. Like nobody knows where are they. I like to give an example. This was not with Justa Paz. It was an international delegation that came to Colombia, and I accompanied them, but I'm so glad I could see with my own eyes as a first experience getting to the territory. We went to a territory called, Pablo, help, where is it? I'm so sorry. El Urabá, okay, Turbo, around here. We were around here. We went there to a church to visit this congregation. It was mostly women. They had kids, but remember, the peace accord were signed in 2016, so time has passed. We went, and the woman started telling us about this story that in 1990 they were in a Sunday service, regular, normal Sunday service, and this armed people, this armed man, a bunch of them came in, took like 20 men out of the congregation, and up until 2021, they haven't seen them. Where are they? Nobody knows. But what happened? The armed conflict is not just man suffering or man's fighting. Also, women are suffering the effects of this. Because in that case, those 20 men were taken, but they were left with everything that involves a house, kids, the scar, the fear, the church, all the PTSD that comes after that. How did they do that? How do they reconcile? How do they heal all that? They started meeting up, and they created like this meditation process for them. by quilting. They started like quilting these square shapes for each of the men of the family of their family. It must have been a son, husband, cousin, you name it. They started doing this quilt in honor of that person. And in tears, they told us, like, we started crying, we started like, why? Questioning God, why was this happening? But that was their process of healing and reconciling with the situation, with themselves, because probably they felt like, what could I have done? Reconciling with the people that did this. And one other woman told us that after that process of reconciling and healing, she saw the man that took her son. I think it was in another situation, not in that same situation, but that took her son in another situation. And she questioned him, like they sat face to face, and she questioned him, like, why? But after all the talking, she told him, like, I forgive you. God loves you, I forgive you. And they hugged, and it was a really big moment. And I wanted to share that with you because the conflict is not just a man's thing. Another thing that I wanted to add is that the Constitutional Court in Colombia identified that within the context of the Colombian armed conflict, the woman has suffered risks that are inherent to her condition of gender. Okay? Because if they're not taken to war, they are also being abused because of their gender. Not just by the armed groups, but also by society. Most of these women are from church, and we all know that sometimes church can be pretty hard on women with the speech of let's follow the Bible. Brian and I were talking this morning about that same thing. So all these women, they have to work not just with being women, but with everything that is brought upon by being a woman. And I wanted to add, according to the Constitutional Court, the women victims of the armed conflict are exposed to the following risk: forced displacement of their houses, that it was good that Margaret mentioned, because mining also affects everybody in their territory. Why? Maybe not mining as a thing. Oh, well, that also, because Pablo answered what it does. But because people are being forcibly displaced out of their houses and out of their territories because they live apparently in a very good soil for mining processes. And what happens? That these mining companies, like Pablo was mentioning, they do the legal process that they have to show to the people in the territories what they're going to do, and if they approve it, then they'll do it. But what these mining companies sometimes they do is they make connections with the armed groups. And the armed groups are the ones that do their dirty job, take the people out of the territory, and then they go to the government like, hey, here are things. We want to have a permit to do this. And it's like, oh, well, let's show the people. There are no people. Oh, great. Then we'll have it. So, another thing I wanted to add, just so that you have the mental picture. If you have seen the movie Encanto, where the grandma is running away from her house with her husband and a whole bunch of people, that is forced displacement. They were being forcibly displaced out of their territory. What happens? In the area of my husband, where they document all of the cases for this prophetic call, sometimes the forced displacement is not just a family being displaced. It's hundreds of people walking in the night away from their houses, like in the movie. Because they don't just move one family, they move everybody. So the women are exposed to not just forced displacement, also sexual violence, sexual exploitation, or sexual abuse in the context of the armed conflict, but also in the context of their houses. Okay? They have a lot, once you get very rural, there's a lot of sexual assault, sexual exploitation in the house. Okay? I said exploitation, enslavement to perform domestic work and roles considered feminine in a society, with patriarchal futures by illegal armed actors and sometimes by their partners in their house. The risk, and not just they have to deal with all that can be on top of their heads, they also have the risk of forced recruitment of their sons and daughters by armed actors, margins of the law, or other types of threats against them, which become more serious when the woman is the head of the family. Likewise, the risk derived from, Likewise, the risk derived from contact or family relationships or personal, voluntarily, accidental, or presumed, with the members of any of the illegal groups that operate in the country, or with members of the public force, mainly due to accusations or retaliations carried out after the fact by the illegal enemy sites. We worked with a group of women. Brian laughs at this story because there's a group of women in Tierra Alta, which, I live here in Bogota. If you can see the star, I live here. You have to take a plane for 1 hour to Monteria, to here, and then go down. It looks like a bit in a map, but on bus is 2 hours. And then once you get to Tierra Alta, you have to go to a village for 3 hours in a motorcycle, through unpavimented roads, rocky roads, mushy roads because it rained, depending on the season. And only a motorcycle, a donkey, or a horse gets there. And Xiomara got there. But once you get there, for example, this woman's, like I said, it's so secluded or so rural, the space, that the kids, girls and boys, they have to go walking to school. What happens? It's such a solitary road because nobody goes there if you're not from that village, that the girls get either raped, kidnapped, killed. So obviously the girls don't want to go to school, their parents don't want to send them, and the boys are the ones that are just going. They also suffered the recruitment, the forced recruitment part, but most of the boys go to school. The girls don't. So there you see a disadvantage in the roles. Not because they want to, but because it's circumstances that impose it to them. Another thing with that group of women, one of them, she had a son that he was a military, an official military. And he couldn't get in the territory because he was presumed a spy for the armed groups. They told her if he comes here, he gets killed. Like he will not appear again. So he was banned from his territory. He was banned from seeing his mother and his brother and sisters. So that's when I say that the presumed, because sometimes it's presumed he wasn't a spy. He said he wasn't. We don't know, but presumed. Also, I said it, the rapes, but some of them lead to femicides and physical and psychological torture in their homes by the armed groups or by their partners or even by their sons. In addition, in the armed conflict, it has been proven practice of forced reproductive planning, forced pregnancies and abortion, and the spread of sexual transmitted disease. Why? Because these women they're called in Spanish botín de guerra, like a war's treasure. Like they rape them or they kill them to use to offend the other group. Like we did this on your turf, on your grounds, to your women. But all of this, having all of this as a context, as a background. Next slide. My area of women, peace, and environmental justice serves by empowering the actions and leaderships of women in scenarios of reconstruction of the social fabric in Colombia, with emphasis on women victims of all types of social and political violence, women leaders of communities and social ecclesial organizations, as well as the consolidation of their active and effective participation in decision-making spaces for the construction of a just and comprehensive peace. Having all of the context that I just told you, we have to uplift all of these groups of women and empower them in the actions they take, because usually they're in auto mode. Like, I have to get the kids, I have to do this, like I don't have time to suffer, to cry, to heal, especially those processes. And if they don't have time for them, they don't have time like for the political advocacy or political processes they have to go through to make the government do what they're supposed to do, make their rights validated. Like, we don't just need clean water because we want clean water. You have to give me this. You have to be responsible for the people of your country. So what we do is we empower them with workshops, and we'll see, there we go, the how. How do we do this? We empower them with different initiatives that guarantee their connection and participation in different social and political scenarios within the context of the 1325 resolution and complementary from the gender perspective for peace building. We also, the second one, we also do territorial political advocacy. When I said I add the word territorial because it's not just a political advocacy, it's a territorial political advocacy. In Colombia, the term territorial is really important because it's not like here on the States, okay, that each state has its different functions. But in Colombia, the territorial thing, each territory has their way of speaking, have their culture, their food, the different geographies change what they're going to do and how they're going to act and what do they need, because not all of the territories need the same thing. Okay, we work with a territory, La Mojana, which I lost it again. Okay, here, it's near here, which is called La Mojana, Mojana as in wet or water, because they have a lot of water, and it's also flooding, it's always flooded with water, but they don't have clean water. Their fishes are all contaminated because of the mining processes and the different processes that happen there. So it's La Mojana without water, without clean water. So that's why it's territorial political advocacy. So they know what, from a gender perspective, how can they advocate in those peace agreement and peace dialogues that are actually running. The other one is dialogues, but not just dialogue with the government, it's dialogue between them. Because this is not just one group of women that are experiencing all of these things. It's all the women in the territory. So they need to have those dialogues for reconciliation between the different or the diverse types of women that are there in organizations, in other churches, the Catholic Church with the Pentecostal Church. All of those dialogues are important. And lastly, the participation processes, because they may talk and they may know how to advocate and have all the tools, but if they don't participate in those processes, nothing is gonna get done. Next slide. The area, yes. Okay, the area is present nationally, but mostly it's divided in 3 macro regions. The southwestern macro region, which includes Chocó, which is here, Chocó, and Cali, which is down here, like this side. The other one is the Caribbean macro region, which includes Barranquilla, which is up here, La Mojana, which I was telling you about, El Bagre and Caucasia, which are in here, in Antioquia, and La Apartada and Tierra Alta, which I was telling you, which is Córdoba, which is around here. And the center macro region, which is Ibagué, which is in the Tolima department. Ibagué, it's here. Armenia, Pereira, Manizales. Obviously, Bogotá. Soacha, which is in the Cundinamarca department, this big right here. And Caquetá, Putumayo, and Nariño. Why are they in the center region? Nobody knows, because they're way down here. Caquetá, I lost it. Caquetá, Putumayo, and Nariño. They got added last year because it was a new project that got in. So we added those 3. And what do we specifically do? Next one. Well, I think we're short on time, so I'll go faster here. This was a moment where Justa Paz, with other 31 social organizations of women, were advocating in the National Developmental Plan that Petro's government is running right now. For what? Because you can have, I'm sorry to all the men that are here, but you can have men doing public policies for women. You need a gender perspective. You need women there to tell you their story, to let you know how are things with our mind, our body, everything that goes on with us. How do we think? What are our needs? So in this case, it was 31 social organizations of different women groups that made those 10 propositions for the National Developmental Plan. 6 got accepted, not all of them, but 6 out of 10 is a very good number. Next one. This is a work day. This was a specific day of working with the remedial routes, or rutas reparadoras is the title, in alliance with the HEP, Okay, those are the unit for looking for disappeared people, the unit for, I forgot the word, reparation to victims, and the HEP, which is the Commission of Truth. What do they do there? They take a moment to have a workshop for reconciling victims. In this case, it can be man or woman, especially women in this case, but victims of the armed conflict. How can you reconcile? They give them tools, they do a workshop, they have different meditating spaces, probably crying spaces. I wasn't here, this was one of my colleagues that was there. But it's a very good space for them to open up about those wounds they have, but also that Justa Paz helps them, Justa Paz and those other units helps them close up that wound. Not just open up and that's it. It's just open up and close it up and heal. Next one. The Regional Multi-Actor Advocacy Working Table. This was in Caquetá and La Mojana. What we do here is, first of all, we give workshops to the women so that they can have the legal terms and the legal and correct way of addressing a situation legally from a lawyer's perspective. That's my colleague. And once they have all those capacities and that empowerment, then they go to the Regional Multi-Actor Advocacy Working Table, where they work with, like it says, multi-actor, with different organizations and with different groups, so they can have a dialogue and develop new proposals for the peace dialogue tables. Next one. And there it is, a group in Tierra Alta. Psychosocial accompaniment, well, that explains itself. And we go give them a psychosocial accompaniment, but also in my case, I went to give a different types of violence workshop. And I went with one of my colleagues that is a lawyer, and she gave the routes of how can they address these types of violence, because they usually know what's happening, but they don't know the name of those types of violence. And if you cannot name them, you don't know they're there, and they continue passing on. The next one. This is a meeting of women from Chocó. Remember that Chocó? It's here. All of this. That they met also in a process of participation of peace, where also determined different proposals for the peace dialogue tables. Next one. Seed, Capital, and Peace Initiative. Here is where our environmental justice focus starts, because what we do, like I said, we empower women, but not just with the legal and the political capacities, but they also need their sustain, their food. And in this case, we did it in Cali, that they started renovating a space that was very trashed out. They started recycling all of that trash. The other two were in Putumayo, where it was a nod of 3 organizations. One of them does different like food of panela. Panela is a type of sugar in Colombia, which is really good. And the other one was a sewing group of women. And the one that you see on the corner, it was also in Tierra Alta, where they started egg-laying chickens. And that was a pretty story, because if you remember the story I told you about my trip, like all of the time it took to get there, once we got there, they received us with a whole lot of things, of fruits and vegetables, because the first seed capital we did with them, it was a vegetable garden, and they received us with a lot of things like this we want to give you so you can try it, the difference in when you're doing it organically and in your garden, as if you buy it off the supermarket. And the second seed capital was those egg-laying chickens. They usually, in the rainy season, they had that in their church. But in the rainy season, it usually floods everything, and they can't get from their houses to the church. So what they did was, in support of all the women, they divided the chickens so that each woman may have a chicken in their house, so they will have that support and that food, not the chicken, the eggs, remember? Not killing the chicken, because then you will not get anything else. So they use the eggs for their food. Next one. And yes. Okay, this is the kids. We just don't work with women. We also work with the entire family, with the kids. And this is called Semillas de Vida, or Seeds of Life. Encounter for boys, girls, adolescents, and young people. What do we do with them? Most of these topics can be covered since you're a little kid. So what we do is, I'm gonna move again, sorry. Okay. I created the content for this workbook. It's not a workbook, it's more of a booklet. I created the content for this booklet in which they covered 5 different units. The units are divided in categories. The first one is talking about themselves and their identity and getting to know themselves. The other one is about human rights, or the human rights of kids. And then the violence based on gender. The other one is talking about conflict transformation. And the last one is environmental justice, because we usually cover these topics with adults, and kids they're left behind in that. And when they grow up, then we want to talk those topics with them. So what we do from the area is start talking these topics from little ages, so that they can grow up in peace and know this, like, internally. And that is in Suacha, which is in Cundinamarca department, here close to Bogota. The other 2 are in La Mojana, and the last one is in Putumayo. Next one. I'm almost finished. This is the School of Human Rights, Nonviolence with a Gender and Environmental Justice Approach, which is a national school that we prepare for the different women in the territory. It's usually a challenge because there's no internet in some territories. It's not that good. So we have to choose a small group, because also it has to be virtually. There's not enough fundings for us to go to the territory and do the classes face-to-face. So we have to do it virtually. And we have to choose a group of, usually we know who have internet, or we ask them, like in the form, who has internet, so that they know they will need internet. Where we cover the same things we cover with kids, the same topics, but with a more adult approach. Next one. And that's the last one, I promise. We have the radio soap operas, which is called Ondas Sororas, and a podcast that is called Hablemos en Femenino, which is a symbolic and religious campaign for the prevention of gender-based violence, the defense of the rights of girls and women. This is in accordance with the communication area. Now this year we're gonna start some stories, like if it was story time for kids, but it's for women, stories. Talking about this different human rights, women's human rights, the defense of the rights, and the different type of violence. All of those topics are gonna be covered there. I didn't put any pictures because we still haven't started, but it's gonna happen. If it's not happening right now, it's gonna happen soon. And the next one. And that's it. Thank you for listening to me. And I'm sorry, I wanted to add, I moved out of the screen. There we go. Usually the question, I don't know if there's any questions, but usually the question is, what can we do with all of this information? And I've been talking about this the whole trip. Usually it's the mining process that Margaret mentioned. There's a lot of Canadian companies going in Colombia, Canadian or Asian, I don't know specifically from where, going in Colombia to extract minerals, different type of minerals, which is affecting the territory, the food, and also people are being forcibly displaced, like I talked about it. So what can you do from here? It's like pay attention. I don't know if the news, because I don't know how many news from Colombia come in here, but be paying always attention to your local and regional government of what are they doing. How can you hold them accountable, not just here in the States, but what are they doing in Colombia or in Latin America? Because a lot of the garbage that comes out of the States end up in Latin America. And some people don't know that, but that also affects the ground in Colombia or in any country in Latin America. So what can you do is hold them accountable for what they are doing and keep up, like, asking them, what are you doing? Where is this going? Because usually things always look really pretty, but for one thing to look pretty, another side has to suffer. So thank you, that's it. Now I'll leave. I'm sorry for talking so much.
Before they leave, first of all, thank them very much for wonderful presentations. The breadth and the extent of what you're doing, the number of programs is so impressive, and it's, so holistic in terms of how you're approaching the problem. Pastor Lisa brought, Pablo, you come up too, because we have prayer shawls that we're going to be giving to our presenters tonight. So, Pablo, come up and let's see. So here are prayer shawls on behalf of our church, and we appreciate very much you traveling all this distance to come up here and give such a wonderful presentation, and just very inspiring. Keep up the good work. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. Any other questions before we have cookies? I think we're good. Thank you.